This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Check out Squarespace through the link in the description below. More on them in just a bit. And look, just before we get started here, I'm going to say that there is a difference in the UK and the US pronunciation of Syracuse, or Syracusia. In England, it's Syra. In the US, it's Syra. I'm going with the UK one because that's how I speak, just to cut off the comments at the pass right there. We've covered several colossal ships here on Mega Projects, from the largest ship ever built, the Seawise Giant, to the monstrous American Nimitz-class aircraft carriers, and the largest cruise liner ever to set sail, the Symphony of the Seas. I remember that one. It was like an ad the whole time because it was like, this shit is crazy. The size of what is frequently put to sea these days is quite simply immense. But what we see today is but the continuation of a long maritime process that stretches back well over 10,000 years. The earliest known boat still in existence is the Pesse canoe, which can be today found in the Dres Museum in Assen in the Netherlands, and it's thought to have been dug out around 8000 BC. However, if we're talking about great monsters of the high seas, the ancestors of our modern leviathans, if you will, then we can only really start with one boat. A vessel of astonishing dimensions which was built around 240 BC and which set sail only once. Widely regarded as the largest ship of antiquity, but only a fragmented myth to us today, this is the story of the Syracusia. Alright, so I'm just going to get the disclaimer out of the way early. We're talking about a ship that was built 2061 years ago today, and much of the information about it is pretty patchy. We're pretty certain it existed, but considering details of this mighty ship have been passed down through countless generations and 2 tumultuous millennia, they are sometimes hazy and occasionally contradictory. To put it simply, this was the original Titanic, the first giant of the seas. Designed and built by the Greek wizard of all trades Archimedes at the behest of Hiram II of Syracuse, it was said to be the largest ship ever built at the time by some margin, with some sources saying it was 50 times the size of a standard warship of the age. But this was much more than simply a warship. The Syracusia was the epitome of luxury in the age of antiquity, and was said to include a library, gymnasium, garden, swimming pool, and bathhouse, as well as a temple and plenty of art. It was also armed to the teeth and came with siege towers, catapults, and a contingent of soldiers thought to number between 200 and 600, depending on your sources. Again, patchy information. The size of the ship meant that it could also carry enormous amounts of cargo and was very much a vessel with multiple purposes. It was a luxury cruise liner, a fearsome battleship, and a dependable workhorse, all rolled into one. The ship takes its name from its home port Syracuse in modern-day Sicily. There are probably few places in the world that have such a culturally diverse history as the island that lies off the Italian mainland. The Phoenician, Carthaginians, Greeks, Romans, Vandals and Ostrogoths, Byzantine Greeks, Argonautes, Chalcidians, Normans, Aragonese, and Spanish have all ruled over the small island at one point or another over the last few thousand years. Back in the 2nd century BC, the Greeks were firmly in control, but with the growing Roman Empire ballooning in power and greedy ambition, it was certainly only a matter of time until their gaze settled on the island. At the time of our story, Hero II of Syracuse had been in power on the island since 275 BC and king since 270 BC. Now, if your history is a little patchy in the BC years, let me just set the scene, because in the Mediterranean at this time, there were several fearsome powers, and it's not at all surprising that a ship like the Syracusia would appear at this point. There was, of course, Rome, at this point still a relatively small young upstart, but one that had gained control over all of modern-day Italy. Then we have Carthage, the dominant empire of the time, which stretched from southern Spain across much of northern Africa. The Ptolemaic kingdom incorporated much of modern-day Egypt, but also included the coastal areas in what is today Turkey. Next up was the Seleucid Empire, which stretched from Turkey to modern-day Pakistan, and finally we have the League of Corinth, the loose confederation of Greek states. All of these empires were gathered around the increasingly busy and dangerous Mediterranean Sea, and over the years, fighting back and forth would dramatically alter the political landscape of the area. Historically, it had been Carthage and the Greek states that had slugged it out for control over the Mediterranean Sea. But with both no doubt eyeing the other, a third force emerged that would go on to crush all that came before it. The First Punic War was fought between Rome and Carthage over 23 years, between 264 BC and 241 BC, making it the longest war of antiquity. It was also the first war that solidified Rome's position as an emerging empire not to be trifled with, and one which saw the beginning of the end for the great Carthage Empire. This was a war that was fought largely at sea, particularly around the island of Sicily. For hundreds of years, Carthage had been the rulers of the open water thanks to their superior navy, and in particular the Quinquereme, the most cutting-edge warship in existence at the time. But once the Romans managed to capture an intact Quinquereme, they were able to reverse engineer the vessel, and suddenly the tables began to turn. Long story short, Rome won the First Punic War and gained control over Corsica, Sardinia, and much of Sicily, that is, apart from the small section known as Syracuse. Now, if you're looking to carve out a small section of the internet for yourself, then you're going to need a little bit of help. Fortunately, that help can come from today's fantastic sponsor, Squarespace. Now, more than ever, people are getting creative with their time. They're reaching into their savings account to start a new business or a blog of some kind. And with Squarespace, the world is yours. You can use it to fashion a website into whatever you want it to be. It's the platform to use when you're ready to start your next web project that you've been thinking about. Are you looking to get in and out quick without thinking too much about what your website should look like? Well, absolutely use one of their templates. But if you're looking to kind of fiddle with all the details and make it much more custom for you, that is also entirely possible on Squarespace because the customization options are amazing. There are also a ton of extra features that Squarespace provides so that your website can thrive. Email campaigns, patronage portals, social integrations, member-only areas, analytics, commercial options, 24/7 customer support. It's everything you could ever want all in one place. So when you're ready to get started with your next web project, whatever it is, it's got to be with Squarespace. Right now, you can go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/megaprojects, and you'll save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. There is a link below, and let's get back to a really old ship. Perhaps it's a mere coincidence that the Syracusia was built a year after the end of the First Punic War, but then again, maybe not. The longest war in living memory had shown everybody in the Mediterranean just how vital a strong and agile navy was, and it's perfectly conceivable that Hiram II of Syracuse chose to build such a mighty ship as a way of amplifying Syracuse's prestige at a time when Rome seemed set to snatch the small enclave. But here's where things get a little strange. You see, the greatest ship ever built at the time was never intended to be used by the Syracusans. It was a gift for one of the rulers that still dominated the area. Sources claim that the Syracusia was built by 300 skilled laborers over the course of a single year. We're not sure about the exact size of the ship, but one source put it at being 55 meters long, 14 meters wide, and 13 meters high. It had enormous sails, and the sides of the ship were said to come with statues of the Greek god Atlas with their arms raised as if carrying the deck of the ship. Below the statues, the lower sections of the hull were lined with lead sheets to prevent ramming from other vessels, a common attack method at the time. The main deck was a crowded place with 8 siege turrets. These were commonly used to attack land fortifications at the time, but it's not immediately clear how they would have functioned on the Syracusia. Separate sources claimed that the turrets were either manned by archers or that each turret may have contained a catapult capable of firing either a 5.4 meter arrow or an 81 kilogram stone. The catapults in the towers seem slightly unlikely because of the force required to launch them, but well, honestly, who knows? Patchy information and all that. However, we're pretty sure that there were 2 catapults located at the bow of the ship on the deck facing forward. Let's just say that if the Syracusia pulled up alongside you, you were probably going to do exactly as you were told. Mixed in with the turrets and sails were plant statues, and perhaps even a promenade area for the passengers to stroll through. It was an odd mix of deadly and decadent. The Syracusia used material sourced from across Europe, with pine and fir from the forests of Mount Etna, cordage used for the ship's rigging from Spain, and hemp and pitch for caulking, waterproofing from the Rhone Valley area of France. It was also said to include ivory and marble, while the floors in the public spaces were covered in giant mosaics depicting the story of the Iliad. There was a great deal of thought put into the design of the boat, with one particularly interesting aspect being the apparent attempts to protect the hull from biofouling by coating it with horsehair and pitch. Biofouling is essentially the accumulation of plants and microorganisms on any object that's in water for a considerable amount of time, and this may well be the first example of the use use of a proactive anti-fouling technology. Just like today's modern cruise ships, there were cabins of all sizes designed for all levels of society. Passengers had the upper decks, while the crew and soldiers on board were accommodated in the lower levels. There were 142 first-class cabins on the second deck with a library and reading room, as well as a gymnasium, a temple dedicated to Aphrodite, a dining room, and a bathhouse. Below deck was where you would find the Syracusia's ample storage areas, supposedly large enough to carry 60,000 measures of grain, 10,000 jars of pickled Sicilian fish, 20,000 talents of wool, as well as 20,000 talents of additional cargo. By the way, a talent is an old measurement unit used in the Mediterranean, with 1 talent thought to equal the weight of about a man at the time. The ship also had stables for 20 horses and could carry roughly 78 tons of fresh water for those on board. The lowest level was reserved for oarsmen, and we think that the Syracusia came with 2 sets of 20 oars, one on either side. In terms of weight, the vessel was an absolute monster at the time, thought to weigh in the region of 2,000 tons. If the Syracusia is now but a distant memory, one gadget that was included on the boat has defied the ages. A problem with the Syracusia was that because of its size, it regularly took on water coming in through the hull. The accumulation of water on a boat obviously isn't great, but luckily the entire project was under the supervision of a true visionary. The water screw first appeared in Egypt sometime around the 3rd century BC, but Archimedes decided to take the next step, and his design, known as Archimedes' screw, is still commonly used today. Composed of a screw inside a hollow pipe, the simple design could be used to drain or transfer water quickly and effectively, and was included in the Syracusia in case water levels became too high. After building such a colossal, exquisite boat, it seemed odd that it was almost immediately given away, but that's apparently exactly what happened. The Syracusia was said to have been always designed to have been a gift for Ptolemy III Eugates, the ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom. We're not entirely sure why, but having come so soon after the end of the First Punic War, and with Rome now breathing down the neck of Syracuse, it may well have been an attempt to sway favor with the empire to the south. The Syracusia only made one trip during its lifetime, the short journey from Syracuse to what is today Alexandria in Egypt. If the slightly mythical tales are anything to go by, the size of the ship meant that it couldn't be moved into the water by manpower alone. Archimedes was said to have arranged a series of levers and pulleys, which he then operated single-handedly to slowly inch the vast vessel down the gangplank and into the water. No doubt everybody witnessing the event held their breath and waited to see if the ship would actually float. And, well, of course, it did, otherwise the tone of this video would have been rather different. We assume that Hieron II of Syracuse was on board the giant ship as he made his way to Alexandria, and one can only begin to imagine the reaction of the local people when the imposing bulk of the ship first appeared on the horizon and gradually crept towards their city. The story of the Syracusia actually runs out at this point, but it's thought that the ship never set sail again. Whether this was down to structural problems or not, we're not sure, but had the ship been truly seaworthy, you would have thought Ptolemy III Eugates would have been eager to show it off. One source suggests its name was changed to Alexandria shortly after its arrival and may have been used as a floating pleasure palace rather than a seaworthy vessel. Whatever happened to the ship at this point, we can't be completely sure, but it seemed to simply disappear from history. Just like the Titanic nearly 2,000 years later, the Syracusia was both the largest ship of its time and perhaps the most luxurious. It also only made a single journey, but thankfully icebergs in the Mediterranean are pretty rare. This ship was built so long ago that it can be difficult to place it in the context of our modern naval exploits, but it set a colossal precedent when it was built back in the 2nd century BC. Like much of the age of antiquity, our knowledge and understanding of it is patchy at best, but its legendary, almost mythical status places this ancient ship in a league of its own. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I'm going to link to them below. And thank you for watching.